name is Andrea. I have the privilege of serving the University of Arizona with the Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement team, and I'm excited to be able to introduce our next speakers. They are here to speak with you about gaming the past, history as time travel. Alison Futrell is Associate Professor of Roman History and Head of the University of Arizona's Department of History, and Paul Milliman is Associate Professor of Medieval History. And they have the unique distinction of collaborating with game designers for Microsoft's World's Edge and Relic Entertainment to create educational content for the strategy video game Age of Empires 4. Do we have any gamers with us today? Yes? All right, so combining research and imagination, historical video games are more than dazzling imagery and entertainment. So you're going to get to see a different side of this type of entertainment, or this type of engagement. They allow us to travel through time and space and engage stories in ways that deepen our understanding of the past and broaden our perspectives on our present. So if you're ready, we're going to embark on a time travel journey with Alison and Paul. So please welcome them.
So thank you so much for that introduction, Andre. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. I know we're competing with the Oscars and Selection Sunday, so it means a lot that you're here. And since you are here, I'm going to assume that you're at least somewhat interested in history, which is good because for the next 30 minutes or so, you're all going to be historians. So since this is a presentation about games and history, I'd like to know a little bit about how you interact with games and history. So how many of you play historical games like Age of Empires or Assassin's Creed? Okay, a few of you, good. How many of you like to watch historical shows or movies? Yeah, like The Tudors or Game of Thrones, great. All right, some more of you. How many of you read academic monographs about history? Just the two of us, okay. How many of you enjoy sitting in a college classroom, listening to long lectures about history? Oh! All right, there is one person. Well, it turns out that you're all pretty much like my students. At the beginning of every semester and every class, I ask my students to complete a questionnaire telling me about their historical interests and how they got interested in history. And like you, many of them talk about playing historical games or watching historical shows. Some of them talk about reading, but none of them have actually ever mentioned reading a historical monograph. And some of them talk about listening to historical podcasts, but none of them have ever talked about listening to long lectures in classes. So there's a disconnect between the way people become interested in history and the way that it's traditionally taught in the college classroom. So this disconnect worries some scholars who fear for the future of the humanities in a world in which people, especially young people, are reading less and gaming more. But that doesn't really concern me because I don't see myself as in competition with popular culture. I don't think others should either, you know? It's a different thing. And, you know, I think instead, as a historian, I should be looking at change over time and trying to understand how these changes affect the way my students engage with historical inquiry. Because playing games like Age of Empires is the way that many people, again, especially young people, first engage with history. And I think that's great. Great historical games are like interactive textbooks. They're immersive. They make people wonder about the places they're going, the people they're meeting, the times they travel to. The scholars at the Value Foundation, which works at the crossroads of gaming and academics, talks about the experience of playing a great historical game being like actually traveling back in time, going into a time machine and going back to this world. That's because a great historical game is interactive, immersive, and authentic. These are the things that drew us to this project. Being willing to meet our students where they are, to time travel back with them into playable pasts, to engage with our students in new and unique ways set Alison and I on this amazing adventure to rethink the way that we teach and learn history. And now Alison's going to tell you how that adventure began.
Yes. So about 3 years ago, I got a phone call from Cara Forney over at UA Online, which wasn't that much of a surprise because we were an early joiner. We had an online degree for a number of years, so of course I chat with her every now and then. But this time, Cara had a secret. She told me that a major tech company was interested in partnering with a reputable university, with a good history department, with historians, because they were going to revise a well-known video game, and they wanted to have historians as guides. They wanted to use the game as a sort of springboard to exploration of the past, and they were looking for someone to help them out. Would I be interested? Now, this is confidential. I had to sign an NDA. Was I interested? And yes, I was interested. Age of Empires 4. I really like games. I like video games. I like online games. I like board games. I like what games do for me. I like to immerse myself in a good story. I like to find out the mystery, discover the secrets, to follow the twists and turns of a good narrative, and find out it wasn't at all what I thought it was. This is exciting to me. And you know, that's what historians actually do. We follow the clues around key moments in history. We figure out how people experienced these critical junctures, how they affected them, what their stories might be, the hidden stories that lurk too in every wave of change over time. So I was interested in doing this. And for more than just that, too, part of my research focus for years has been the way that history is used in popular culture, how people who are not professional historians draw upon the evidence and the textures of the past to create new things that have meaning to them. This is something that I incorporate into my classroom. My students go on these voyages of discovery themselves and re-experience physically and through food and through exercise and through movement in time. Roman spectacles, for example, as we see here, or Roman theater. And did you know all Roman dramas are musicals? They are. And I'm interested in musicals. I'm interested in this musical, for example, which started out as a senior project for its main creator, Lisa Moss, who got together with her good friend, Toby, and made this musical. Lisa was obsessed with the Tuners, and she wanted to do something along those lines. So the two of them created an amazing drama, musical drama, that they presented at Cambridge University, that then took it up to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in 2017. And from there, it went to London, it went to Broadway, and it's now on US tour. Have any of you seen Six, the musical? Yay! You should all see it. I'm sure it's going to come to Austin. Why wouldn't it come to Austin, please? And it'll cast a new lens for you, I hope, on the Tudors. I am obsessed with the Tudors, like Lisa. I have strong views about Anne Boleyn. And there are very creative ways that you can explore history, use history, draw from history, and find yourself in the historical past.
As you'll soon see, Alison has strong views about many historical women, not just Anne Boleyn, and not just famous ones like Anne Boleyn, but ones that have been forgotten by history. And that's what makes playing games so great, particularly Age of Empires 4, where gamers are encouraged to make history your story. And that's what's really great about what we've done here, is we've tried to help gamers become gamer historians, to create their stories, linking their lives with past lives, to engage in meaningful, authentic historical research. And I use the word, I'm talking about authenticity rather than accuracy, because authenticity allows you to explore history in a way that sitting down and memorizing a bunch of factoids does not. History is not memorizing names and dates. It's not. So this playful way of engaging with history allows you to do so much more. And I'm going to now show you the ways in which Age of Empires 4 allows you to do this. First, there's the gameplay itself, which stretches from England to China and covers 500 years of history. You engage in various historical missions, and between these missions, there are these bridge videos. These amazing bridge videos that are shot at the sites of the battles. Here we're at Senlac Hill, where the Battle of Hastings was fought in 1066. And it's really great that you can see the past and the present, particularly when they include these figures here to try to bring you back to what it would have looked like in 1066, when you superimpose that on what it looks like now. I love the way the past interacts with the present. I love the way the real world interacts with the game world. And then there are also these videos called hands-on history videos, which are little mini documentaries that get unlocked after you complete certain missions. These are also great. They're shot on location throughout Europe and Asia. They're really amazing. They show you how things are made, what people did. They're one of the most popular aspects of this game. So Alison and I really wanted to build off of what the game does. So we decided to create our own unlockable content called Illuminated Histories. These are Atlas Obscura style deep dives into the history surrounding the game. We really try to model for gamers what it is that historians do, how they use primary sources, how they interpret them to make history, so that they can go on and do their own historical research. So in order to keep things focused, for the first set of Illuminated Histories on the Normans, we decided just to focus on one primary source, one medieval object, the very first one that gamers encounter in Age of Empires 4, the Bayeux Tapestry. And Alison's now going to show what focusing on this one particular primary source can do, how we can explore so many aspects of medieval society, including ones that are overlooked, like how women made history.
Yes, women made history. And not just by standing next to a male who is doing something important, or even doing important things themselves, though they certainly did that. But they made the stories that we use now as the basis of our exploration into the past. And that includes the Bayeux Tapestry. This is what we see behind me. This is a 70-meter long piece of linen, embroidered with the story, and the first story, the first narrative of the Norman conquest. So, who's behind this? It's a woman. Let's go to the deathbed scene, shall we? Go. Spin. Move.
I think we need to go to, a little bit more.
We need to go
a little bit more
to the deathbed scene. There it is. Moving to the deathbed scene. This is what we see over here. The deathbed scene. And up on that top level of the deathbed scene is Queen Edith, wife of Edward the Confessor. He's the one who's dying, by the way, in the deathbed scene. You can see him with the crown over there being propped up. She's lifting a veil to her tears, with the sadness, of course. He is her husband and he's dying. Furthermore, they don't have any children. And the fact that they don't have any children is actually what has led to the leadership crisis that leads to the Norman conquest. There is no natural heir to the crown. So who is going to take over the throne? Who has the right to wear the crown? Who is the rightful claimant? Well, one person might be this guy in front, right next to Edith, with his hand stretched towards the dying king. That's Harold. That's Edith's brother. Harold and Edith come from a noble family in England, but not a royal one. So the only reason he's able to get this close to the dying king is her. She is the link between Harold and the crown. And as you can see, he's reaching his hand towards that of the dying king. They are among the faithful ones that the inscription refers to on the top, there at the last to learn what the king has to say. So she's the link, and in some ways you could say she's the kingmaker for Harold. She does more than that, though. Within a few months of Edward's death, she is the one who puts forth, produces a biography of the deceased king, which puts her spin and her approved version of what it was he did, what he accomplished, and who he was. And then she moves on from there. While the Norman invasion is happening, she makes her way to Wilton Abbey for safety. So let's go to another woman in the Bayeux Tapestry, who she finds at Wilton Abbey. Onward to Elfgiva! Whoa! Go on, a little bit more. Elfgiva, Elfgiva, there, Elfgiva. This is the only woman who actually has a name in the Bayeux Tapestry. And she's the sister of Edith and also of Harold. She is the abbess at Wilton Abbey, which is where, remember, Edith has gone for refuge. And Edith funded a chapel that was built there to honor her sister's leadership, and we think that that's what this represents, this structure right here. So Elfgiva is the abbess at Wilton Abbey. She's there with her sister. Their brother is, trying to make his way to the top of things. And there are a number of women who join them there during this time of war. It's there, we think, that the whole plan for this piece, for the Bayeux Tapestry, was conceived, divvied up, planned, and created. That it's the needlework skills of the women there at Wilton Abbey and the leadership of people like Elfgiva and Edith that led to the creation of this whole thing. And it's here where you find influences of their experiences, their stories, built into the tapestry itself. So the tapestry is meant as kind of an accommodation. After all, they've just been conquered by a bunch of Normans, and they have to find some way to deal with them, right? And this is their coming to terms with that. And certainly it's true that a lot of the women there as refugees are going to be married off to some of their new Norman overlords. But this is the way they find their way to influence how the story gets told. And this is one of the first chronicles, here in sort of visual form, graphic novel form, of what happened in 1066. And the history does not stop there. It's not just great needlework that these English women are known for. They are busy, and I'm very charmed to see this showing up in the gameplay in Age of Empires, where you see all this construction being done by women. So as William is working his way towards the north, laying havoc around him in England, the women are cleaning up after him. So you can see them with their long skirts, building things, building Fulford Abbey in this particular circumstance, sowing new crops, building new structures, creating the infrastructure of the new world in which they live. They are busy creatures. And their work contains more than that, too. We find women experiencing war in Age of Empire. We see women running from soldiers in the countryside. We see women finding refuge in Paris as the English threaten the city with their troops. We see the experience of women in warfare, and it reflects evidence found again in the Bayeux Tapestry. So, This particular scene right here, the burning house. When William was trying to get Harold to come to this showdown against him, he had to lure him down from the north of England, and one way he did so was basically by attacking civilian targets. So here we see a woman and her child, who's around the corner. Believe me, the child is actually there, whose house is being burned behind them. We see the mute expression of the uplifted hand as these huge arsonists burn the home in which they live. They're surviving, but they're walking away from the ruins of their former lives. So this is a means of the tapestry honoring that strength and resilience that it took to carry on, to go forward into the future, an unknown future for them. Many mothers, many women like this would be married to Norman husbands. And in the next generation, when longer, extensive textual chronicles of the story will be written, many of them were written by sons of these English women who present their mother's experience, their mother's knowledge of the land, their mother's resilience as inherently part of those chronicles of the Norman invasion. Next. Okay. But that's not all they did. Skilled with needles, but also skilled in war. The women of England, the women of Norman France, were administrators and constables and supporters in a very martial society, and sometimes active participants themselves. And this is honored by Age of Empires too. Here we have Nicola de la Haye, who was the constable of the castle of Lincoln and its defender in the 13th century, raising her sword on high. Here we have in gameplay, women archers at very close range. Shoot those people, women! Ooh. Over here, we have more evidence of this. We have a Swedish tomb from the early medieval period of a woman warrior who's buried with her favorite horse and her favorite weapons by her side. Or in this particular manuscript, where we see a battle between the virtues and the vices, and the virtues are winning. We can see the female virtue here, mighty thrust against that vice through its head. Go virtue, woo! So the warlike experiences of women did exist. There is evidence that can be found. But later writers of a few centuries past this time tried to suppress these stories. They weren't interested in these stories. They found them unlikely. They found them probably untrue. And they didn't think them worth knowing. They didn't think them worth knowing. Are they worth knowing? Yes, of course they're worth knowing. Come on, I want to know these stories. These stories are worth telling. And it's hard to track them down now because some people thought they should just pass into oblivion. So, women in war includes, of course, Joan of Arc. She's probably the most famous woman who's involved in warfare in the medieval period. And Joan's story is featured pretty extensively in Age of Empires 4. What I like about the Joan saga here is it shows the way in which Age of Empires has layered on evidence into our experience as players of Joan of Arc. This is done visually. It brings us into public monuments, public memorials, the way in which we all experience history in the world around us, and then brings the game into that. And it starts with Joan of Arc's first appearance on the public stage, when she meets the king. It starts with a memorial. This plaque was set up in 1929 to commemorate the 500th anniversary of Joan meeting the king. Here's the plaque. Here's how we first see Joan of Arc. We are told that she's Jeanne d'Arc, the teenage girl who changed the course of history. And then that plaque turns into her avatar from the game, which emerges from the public monument, from the memorial. So we see this seamless connection between the game and the way that we learn about the past. So we move on to Joan's first real accomplishment here, her ability to have her king crowned. Bear in mind, the king had been struggling for a long time to be legitimized, but with the presence of the English in France, he just wasn't able to get it done. He needs to be crowned so that people can see him and accept him as king. And that's something that has to be done at Reims Cathedral. With Joan's army, the English were swept out of the area, and that could happen. So we see this accomplishment through a statue of Joan that was put in place by the City Council of Reims in 1896. So here we see Joan in her armor, her sword in hand, facing the cathedral, her goal to get her king crowned, to get him made real as a king. Then the point of view switches, and we see Joan approaching the facade of the cathedral. Her goal, remember, to get the coronation done, to have him recognized as secular king, but also to have the anointing that marks him as chosen of God. So there Joan is, her way is clear. Then the statue turns into one of the golden augmented reality that Paul was talking about. And suddenly we are immersed in this. We are at Joan's side, seeing the door open to have the coronation done. We are surrounded, like Joan is, by the loyal people of France, ready to see this happen for their king. And then the whole scene turns into a book. The history tome that marks the transition between different parts of the campaign and the Age of Empires game, that tells us the stories, that tells us what the player has accomplished, that points the way to the future. We are moving, of course, into Joan's future too. We're going into Joan's end, the death of Joan of Arc, the end of her story here. This again involves scenes from the world around us, the world we experience as our contemporary world, as well as elements from the past, put there using the structures, the avatars of the game. So here we are in Rouen, where she was executed by the English. We're standing next to the Church of St. Joan of Arc, which was constructed in 1979. But we are also surrounded by the golden avatars from the game. So we're in this space that is modern, but is also old, also historical, seeing these things happen. One of the punctuation spots in this space is the actual monument to Joan of Arc, which looks like a cross, but also looks like a sword thrust into the earth at the spot where her execution took place. This pinnacle stands there. So we witness what's going on. We are surrounded by other witnesses to this event, this momentous point in time. And we are co-experiencing it as a player, as someone who is a participant in history. And then the point of view changes completely. The camera zooms up, and now it's looking down at this scene. So we're able to see the surrounding people. We're able to see the fire. We see the actual executioner who's seeing to the action destined by the English overlords. We're seeing it happen from above. We have a sort of different perspective in terms of time and in terms of space, now that we are removed from the event to some extent. But we're also looking down from the same perspective that players of the game have to events in gameplay, from above, seeing things happen. So we're both of the past in the past, in the present, learning about the past as participants in this historical continuum.
So as Alison has demonstrated, with these illuminated histories, we worked really hard to explicitly link everything we discuss to things in the game, either in the gameplay or in one of the videos they watched. We wanted to make these as relatable as possible to the people playing the game so that they would better understand the history surrounding the game. So, because this is a credit-bearing course, there has to be an assessment. And I wanted to make this assessment as fun and playful as possible, so there's no quizzes. I hate quizzes. I never have quizzes. Instead, I designed an online scavenger hunt where I lead people on historical research in the online collections of some of the world's leading museums, libraries, and public history projects. Once the students complete the assessment, they get their credit. But we hope the end of the game is just the beginning for these gamer historians. We've created a special pathway to bring these gamer historians to Arizona Online. Alison and I both teach courses about games and with games. We teach them in sort of non-traditional ways though, like Alison's role-playing. These courses involve just as much work, just as much research, just as much learning as traditional courses. But we assess it in different ways. We have them engage in role-playing, or cook historical recipes, or make their own historical games. That's because, experimental learning show that having fun and being academically rigorous are not mutually exclusive. You can do both of these things at the same time.
Absolutely true. What I'm trying to say is we need to learn the past in order to move forward into the future. The experiences that we perceive as history happening around us enable us to see forward with clear eyes into a new kind of understanding of our place in the continuum of time and space. One of the things that I really love about studying history is it's so much bigger than I think it is. Going through these fine details and finding out that the possibilities in the past were a lot bigger than I thought they were, a lot broader, a lot more engaging. And that makes me feel that possibilities for us now are likewise a lot bigger than I thought they could be for all of us. So I hope you'll enjoy us in immersing ourselves in the past and in the future of the past by checking out our labels and coming along with us for this voyage. So thank you very much.
So I think we have time for questions,
Yes.
if anybody has any.
Comments?
Or comments, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hello?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So I feel like gaming has largely shaped me into what I know today, including my education. If you look at, the very young years of Math Blaster to the granddaddy of them all, which was Oregon Trail, we're kind of moving into educational history. For me, now trying to parse through the many games that are on the market, and many games that do tackle history, it's not always clear where history ends and the extravagant, I suppose, begins. So for a historical consumer, or someone who still loves this type of game, how do we know what's historically accurate and what we should sort of parse through as just entertainment? Is there a place that we can find this, and how do you feel as, historians working in gaming areas to determine what we should be looking at as history and entertainment?
That's why you should be taking classes.
Yeah.
No, seriously, I have students who are like, I wanted to know more about Cleopatra, and here I am learning more about Cleopatra. I watch streaming with access to Wikipedia by my side. There's a, oh, happened? Oh, what did happen? Oh, more reading, more rabbit hole, more out there to find out, and various ways in which to do so. I mean, if you want recommendations for games, but again, as Paul said, authenticity is what we're looking for rather than a strict repetition of what happened in the past. Using the past as kind of a gateway to the imagination that resonates with authenticity.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're trying to do here, is to give people, to show them there's a world beyond Wikipedia, which is fine, but to show that there are other great sites online that they can go and learn the history. Because so many of my best students tell me they got into history because of playing these games, and they just went and did their own research afterwards. And that's what made them interested in this. And also, it's interesting you mentioned Oregon Trail, because it points out that games themselves have a history. The newest version that you can play on your iPhone, you could play as an indigenous person who might not see Oregon Trail as such a great thing. There's also a great game, I don't know if any of you have played, it's called Never Alone, which was made with the native North Alaskans. It's really a brilliant game. It's beautiful, it's wonderful to play, and it's a way to show that communities can come together and work with game designers to help tell their stories, to make sure their history gets preserved and to get shared with other people around the world.
Yeah, and when I'm looking for a game, I'm looking for kind of a fun experience rather than something that is going to be weighing me down. So one of my favorite history games is a board game called Donner Party, where you try and figure out who among you is the cannibal. And there are votes every round. And it has actual, you take on a character from the Donner Party, and tidbits of what was going on in that dreary winter year.
Yeah, I did spend my first 20 minutes of playing Never Alone getting mauled by a polar bear. So once I figured it out, it was more fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. And I just wondered what the students' reactions have been, and also maybe how long it's taken you to get it to the point of actually implementing it in classes and courses.
Well, I've actually designed a sort of follow-up to this. So this was designed as a standalone one-unit course that anybody can do online. And then I've designed a game or course based entirely on this game. It's a regular 3-unit course in which students will pursue their own research on topics that they've become interested in through playing this game. And I will work with them individually to build that up. And I like to assign, like I said, no tests, no term papers, none of that stuff. For my final assignments, I teach a course, a gen ed course on games, and the final assignment there is to build their own computer game in Twine. I have them build websites with Adobe Express, story maps, that kind of stuff. So the purpose of my courses is really to use things as inspirations to get students to do their own research. That's what interests me more than anything else, is to find the wonder in these things and then go pursue that. So I'm looking forward to doing that in the fall. I'll be teaching that course for the first time in the fall.
Yeah, the game was finally released last year, but there were a number of different delays for Age of Empires 4. So the official release date came in the middle of a semester. So trying to organize that around the U of A's schedule was a little trickier than we had thought.
Hi there, this was a great presentation. So I have a question about the crossroads of academics like yourselves and developers who were on the other side. So how did this process go usually, and was there a cycle that you worked through as you developed things with the Microsoft folks?
Right, once we agreed to this and signed all the contracts and so forth, we had a number of different meetings with developers and with representatives of
Arizona Online.
Right, yes. Talking about what they had planned so far, what was already in place. We talked about ways in which we could find another location for things that we're contributing. We had many talks with a number of people at the U of A as well as with Microsoft folks about how we can have some sort of final action, final activity, some something that gets assessed to get the credit, and how that can fit in with the plans that they had for Age of Empires. So since we were doing most of this in 2021, it was the busiest year, we were having a lot of Zoom meetings with a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's pretty much the game was set. All that stuff that you saw had been shot before the pandemic, thankfully, or none of those videos would have been made. And then we got to play like a pre-alpha version of the game. That was a really interesting experience to be part of that, to play a game as it's in those earlier stages of development. So it was a pretty fun experience.
Yeah, I found out I wasn't particularly good at battle scenes. Yeah, I nearly got William the Conqueror killed.
Yeah.
Hastings.
Rewriting
surrounded.
history. Yeah.
Horses were pierced by arrows and stuff like that. So.
You talked about almost getting William the Conqueror killed.
Yeah.
Is that a real possibility in the game?
I don't know that it is. Maybe not in the campaign, but maybe in the other stuff.
Yeah, so we focused on the campaign versions
Right.
of that, and those are sort of predetermined ones, because you can watch people who are really good at this game, who are sort of frustrated sometimes by the campaigns because they don't need to, do all this. They don't need to have a feigned retreat to break the shield wall. They're just going to break the shield wall because they're that good at the game. So the game's sort of structured around historical events that happen. It sort of forces you to act through that.
Right.
A follow-up. If you could have different outcomes, would you?
Well, that's actually something I loved when they put out the promo for this in April of 2021 before it was released. They had these great scenes of like Indian elephants rampaging through the streets of medieval London and Chinese sharks sailing up the Thames, and just thinking about the counterfactual history that this game could explore. If the empires had gone the other way, what would have happened? So it's the campaigns won't allow you to do that, but certainly in the regular gameplay you could do that.
Yeah, so they're sort of like treading up to an interesting line there. I mean, one of the things they wanted to do with this version of Age of Empires is open up the possibilities. They wanted to make it broader, about more people's stories, more people's perspective, built into the game itself. So making the esports version where you could have Indian elephants who are attacking London is part of that. And it excites the imagination, and it makes you think about the strategizing as well that is done in imperialism. So creativity, fun.
Were there any specific suggestions you made that the developers implemented?
No, that's a great question. By the time we got involved in it, it was, it was going. The deadline was there. They were pushing through, and we just worked on our bit. We got to talk to a lot of the developers, talk about the choices they made, talk about the sources they used, and all that stuff. But nobody was going to be rewriting anything. It was too close to the release deadline. So that's a great question.
But one of the things that we are looking forward to doing in the history department is a double major with the School of Information. So people armed with historical content and with much more savvy about games, working perhaps with designers of the future or becoming designers of the future, and embedding history in a new and intriguing way in some of these game opportunities. That's what we're excited about too.
All right. Anything else? No? Okay.
Okay.
If there are any more questions,
All
we'd be
right.
very happy to talk to you all later on. And thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.